Hello and welcome to the Dune Minute Podcast, your place to dive deep minute by minute into the cinematic adaptation of Frank Herbert's world of Dune. I'm one of your hosts, John.
And I'm Zach.
And we are back with another episode. It's Tuesday. And yesterday we left off with the peak of Paul's visions, prescience, trip, whatever you want to call it, in the still tent. And we are still continuing on after Jessica had begun, as we had discussed yesterday, quote unquote, consoling Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, my first line is Jessica is still quoting or quote comforting Paul.
It doesn't last long though,
No,
because
it does
Paul
not.
just turns to her and yells for the first time perfectly in the voice, "Get off me."
I interpreted this different.
Okay.
I thought it was half voice, half his actual, like, just him shouting. I didn't.
It's kind of a little bit of both. Sure.
Yeah, I interpreted it as like this is an emotional outburst, and that was kind of a unconscious thing that he did using the voice.
Yes. No, that much I agree to.
Yeah.
But this is definitely the first moment where he actually gets the voice right.
Yes. However, even if he didn't use the voice, I think Jessica still would have backed up like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I feel like this is that first moment that every parent has where their kid snaps back at them.
Sure.
Not saying that as a parent because I'm not a parent, but I remember that very first time that I fucking just snapped back at my dad.
Yeah.
It didn't end well for me.
Of course not. It never does.
No, but and rightly so. I was being a fucking dickhead. I think I was 14, just thinking I was hot shit or
famously
whatever.
not turbulent time in any child's life.
No, never. But yeah, no, she definitely was taken aback. But Paul yells, "Get off me! You did this to me. You Bene Gesserit made me a freak."
Yeah. That voice usage. Speaking of teenagers, it made me think is this what a teenage Bene Gesserit does? When your voice is changing, at least for us guys, our voice cracks and God, mine still does. Yeah. But is this
love me?
Yeah, is this the equivalent that the Bene Gesserit go through? Sometimes when they're just riled up, the voice just slips out because they can't control it that well.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe.
I feel I don't know, because I feel if you're actually brought up in Bene Gesserit, schooling and everything, you're taught from a young age, first of all, what the fuck emotions are and how you handle them.
Sure.
So I don't think outbursts like this are.
Well, Paul got the Cliff Notes version of Bene Gesserit training at best.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the thing is Paul wasn't raised in the Bene Gesserit environment that Jessica was raised in, and Paul was also, as a Duke's son, allowed a certain amount of freedoms to just kind of fuck off and be, a rich kid and, do whatever he wanted and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Fly ships with his best buddy, Duncan, Idaho. So.
Yeah, I don't know. That's it. That's all I got to say about that. But yeah, it looked like a half-assed attempt. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He goes and you did this. You Bene Gesserit made me a freak.
Yeah, I will say I do think it is an unintended use of the voice.
Sure.
Nonetheless, it is his first successful use of the voice.
Right. And Jessica truly looks hurt after he says this.
Yeah. I think she also really begins to look hurt because at this moment Paul begins to sob. And this is where he's actually letting his emotions run through. So, but what were you saying?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think this is maybe the first time that, and this goes back to something you said yesterday, that she actually considered Paul's opinion on this matter, and the matter becoming the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah, she actually sees Paul as a son, I think, for the first time instead of just
a means to an end,
a means to her fanatical end of
the
Bene or of the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah. like we know it was her plan and her decision to train him from a young age.
And as we theorize, microdose him.
Yeah. And obviously it was her decision to have a boy instead of a girl, but
against the wishes of her order.
Right.
Yeah.
I highly doubt that there was ever a time when she sat down with 8-year-old Paul and said, "Hey, this is something that you can do in the future. Do you want to try and maybe see what we can make out of this?"
Yeah.
You know, she was steering that ship from day one.
Parenting from the shadows.
Yeah. And Paul didn't have a say in this. So now that he's like, I understand what you did to me and this is fucked up and you made me a freak. I think this is a moment of realization for Jessica that probably hasn't happened before.
Fuck you, Mom.
Yeah. And she stays kind of in hurt mode for a couple of seconds, but switches to mom mode pretty quickly.
Yep.
As Paul starts crying, and we finally see him mourn, really, or at least start that mourning process.
Yeah, he's fully out of Vision's and Prescient's territory and back to reality.
Yeah.
In this moment. And this is where it hits him that his father is dead. And he even says so much between sobs, like while Jessica is back to holding him and everything.
Yes. Captain Exposition says, "My father is dead."
Well, I don't think it's Captain Exposition. I think this is the moment where he's finally had the time to process, because like we talked about, up until now, he's only been in Mentat mode, just absorbing everything. And this is human processing and the beginning of his grief.
Yeah. He gets a pass this time.
Yeah.
Kind of that's as far as like action goes, that's kind of it for this minute. I mean,
but it's not.
We get some really cool shots of the still tent filtering water.
Yep.
Really love seeing how this works. And we get a bunch of like contemplating shots from Paul holding the ring. Not
just holding the ring. He's actually putting on the ducal signet for the first time.
Yeah. The last couple seconds of the minute is him slipping it on his index finger.
We talked about it, or I talked about it a little bit last week, maybe even the week before, when we were talking about, the still tent for the first time and everything, but, not sponsored. Art and Soul of Dune does mention that the still tent was intentionally designed from the inside to look like the inside of a womb. Mm-hmm. We only get more of that imagery here with the tubes, in the water recycling system.
Yeah.
Looking not unlike veins and arteries and everything on the inside of this pink glowing tent and everything. And, there's obviously the imagery of Paul's rebirth in this moment here. Mm-hmm. So
I assume those
tubes we're going to carry forward with that into the next few minutes too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the next minute at least.
I assume those water tubes go to some kind of collection device or a canteen or something, which
guess you'll have to listen on tomorrow's episode.
Great.
Because the name that I have for it is the best name.
Okay. I'm excited. So yeah, as the minute ends with Paul slipping the ring onto his index finger, that's like I said, where our minute ends. So I got a fair amount of book notes for this one.
Sure.
So I'm going to dive right into everyone's favorite part.
Book versus movie.
Book versus movie. So again, this is all coming from the same chapter in the book with Paul and Jessica in the still tent. And
same chapter house in the book?
Not same chapter house. That is another whole book itself.
Whoa.
Whoa. So
we'll do Dune chapter house minute.
Oh, God. So Paul is understandably upset with Jessica in the books. He goes a step further in his questioning. Like in the movie, he says, you did this to me. You made me a freak.
Yeah.
Those lines are thought in the book, not said.
It's not just Jessica though. Like he says the Bene Gesserit made me a freak. Like,
right. He goes a little bit further in the books and he says, what was my father's involvement in this? Like, did you ever ask him if this is what he wanted?
Yeah.
So he is really like laying into Jessica in this moment. and saying like,
you bitch,
effectively like, what the fuck did you do to me my entire life?
Yeah, he calls her just like a completely selfish woman that never cared.
I mean, and in a way, that's not untrue.
It's not. Like, as much as she loved Leto, like, all of the decisions about Paul's existence were strictly hers.
Yeah. In the books, after his visions calm down, and he refers to them as not as visions, he refers to them as waking dreams.
Yeah.
Which I think
that's a really fucking cool way to describe them.
It is, and it carries a different connotation than like vision does.
Yeah.
Because he's conscious during all this. He's thinking, he's talking, but he's also seeing the stuff that he's seeing, and he's having all this stuff happen in his mind. So it is truly a waking dream. So I think it's a good term. So I'm going to refer to them as that a couple of times as we go throughout the week. After his waking dream kind of calms down, Paul remarks that the path that he saw, which is the one that I mentioned yesterday of, it's marked with areas of gray obscurity with peaks of violence.
Yeah.
He said that's not his only path forward here. It's the one that he doesn't want to take. And there's, multiple ways to get through the future, but that's the one that he kind of keeps landing on as maybe the best option, even though he doesn't want to.
Could it be a golden path?
Well, we don't get that name mentioned anytime soon. Something that stands out in this moment is that he tells Jessica that her Missionaria Protectiva has bought us a bolt hole. And this, in the books, really takes her back because she has never mentioned those words to him. This is something that he should not know.
Yep. Kind of like how he knows that she's pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like it's further evidence of him, knowing things beyond what he should know, and him kind of reaching that higher state of consciousness.
Just as a quick reminder, the Missionaria Productiva is what it sounds like. It's Bene Gesserit missionaries going around spreading all of their propaganda and everything, as we see very heavily in part 2. I mean, we kind of see it in part 1 only briefly, but the whole Lisan al-Gaib is a product of Missionaria Productiva, and it's not just on Arrakis. It is everywhere that the Bene Gesserit are doing this. Yeah.
Anywhere where they think that it can benefit them, they have ingratiated themselves and made it easy for them to assimilate pretty much into a society. And
not just assimilate, but
they can embed themselves in culture.
In a way, subjugate.
Yeah.
Because if they can convince people over hundreds or thousands of years that some messianic figures is approaching with vague ass terms for their arrival, they can use that figure to then manipulate local peoples into doing whatever they want. And unsurprisingly, Paul does just that. We'll talk about it a lot more as we get into the end of part 2 and everything. But
that's going to be a strong theme as the
big theme of Dune part 2.
Yeah. So Jessica is asking him about, what are you seeing? What's going on here? That question, what do you fear, that we talked about yesterday?
Yeah.
Is kind of expanded upon a lot in the books, and she's really trying to figure out exactly what's going on with Paul. And one of the things that he tells her about what he's going through is the part that I wanted to read from the book today. This is Paul speaking here. The things that can happen here, I cannot begin to tell you, he said. I cannot even begin to tell myself, although I've seen them. The sense of the future, I seem to have no control over it. The thing just happens. The immediate future, say a year, I can see some of that. A road as broad as our central avenue on Caladan. Some places I don't see, shadowed places, as though it all went behind a hill. And there are branchings. He fell silent as the memory of seeing that filled him. No prescient dream, no experience in his life had quite prepared him for the totality with which the veils had been ripped away to reveal the naked time. End of reading. Again, go read this book. This chapter is amazing.
Yep.
So I picked that passage because it really illustrates kind of what's going on in Paul's mind right now. Like that the veil had been ripped away to reveal naked time.
Naked time is such a cool.
Yeah. I mean, Frank Herbert had some good lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just like
good old Hank Herbert.
He's seeing all of these different branches of the future that can happen, where they split off, the decisions that make them split off. Do they converge back into, other timelines, all this stuff. So time travel and like reading the future is always a touchy subject in sci-fi stuff. It's easy to get wrong.
It can get so weird so fast. And
yeah.
So
if you have experience with like seeing things like that, and my mind's going to Star Trek immediately.
Yeah.
Just with all their temporal shenanigans that they get into every season, or every series, I'd say. It's hard. It can be a hard thing to illustrate and to explain and to get that point across. But I think Frank Herbert does a good job here. He doesn't go into specifics too much. He leaves it vague. He leaves it up to interpretation, which is good.
I read a thing on Reddit back when I was like just kind of catching up on what Reddit's opinion on the Dune Awakening game was and everything. And someone did a really good way of describing Frank's writing as soft world building.
Yeah.
Which I think is perfect because it's just enough to kind of get you there, but then not get lost in the minutia.
Yeah.
Unlike other writers that you and I are fans of that may or may not be taking fucking forever to write a fucking book that was promised to us a decade ago, but I'm not going to name any names. Are
you talking about a Song of Ice and Fire series?
Maybe.
Okay. I'm with you.
Yeah.
He gives you enough to where it makes sense, but he doesn't drown in the details, like you said. And I think we're all the better for it, because once you start trying to, split hairs into that minutia of things, that's when you really get yourself in trouble. Brian Herbert. So the way that he's describing this is like Paul is seeing all these different branches and into the future. Some are good, some are bad. It's a very new experience for him, and he's dealing with it right now.
Yeah.
So this is kind of how he explains it to his mother, which I think she, of all people, probably has the best chance of understanding.
But still is just like,
what the fuck
are you on, dude?
Yeah. So
the fuck are you on about?
So it's just after this, he kind of like realizes that he's a bit alone with these feelings.
Yeah, I mean, loneliness is Paul's curse, I guess you could say.
So he doesn't really,
and it's not just Paul's curse too.
No, he doesn't really try to get Jessica on board anymore. Like, he still explains things to her and everything, but he stops with I need her to, understand fully what's going on. He accepts that kind of like the burden as his own a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is just another like layer onto his personality that we'll see throughout the books. That is kind of the end of his trip in the desert in the books. We after this, they start making plans, which we'll talk about tomorrow.
Yep.
And start moving forward with the plot.
For a minute of the movie where there's not a lot going on, there's a lot to talk about here.
Well, these are dense themes that we're getting into, and the movie does a really good job of explaining what we need to know in these moments, but there's so much more.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure that was a discussion that they had when they were, putting the screenplay together, was how much do we want to dive into everything that Paul is feeling in this moment. And I think they did it the right way for a mass market movie.
Yeah. That
needs to, at the end of the day, make a lot of money.
Yep.
And you know what? It was very successful in doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Would I have loved more? Of course.
Yeah. Give me a fucking extended edition. Yeah. I know you've got it filmed. It's sitting in a vault somewhere.
Maybe so.
I don't know. With all the shit talking of Brian Herbert that we do on this podcast, we're probably like dooming ourselves to ever like getting heard out by anyone.
Yeah, whatever.
Fuck it. I'm here. You know what? This is my goddamn podcast. Fuck you.
All right. Well, on that, we will be back tomorrow. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us. We are on Instagram at the Dune Minute. We are on Twitter at Dune Minute, and you can send us an email. On Gmail.
Nope.
On Gmail.
Nope.
At Gmail.
Nope. It's just send us an email.
Send us an email at duneminute@gmail.com.
There we go.
So we will be back tomorrow and figure out where they're going after this tent.
Yep.
All right, cool. See you then.
See ya.